Good morning, guys. Today we are going to take a look at questions about the chapter November from my novel 2020. If you don't remember, I am Josh Scherrer and I'm the author of that book. And we are going to go ahead and get started with those questions. So, Giselle asked, why has Marlin had to kill so many roamers? And why do they keep attacking Marlin and his dad? So, kind of a recap, if you remember, it's now November in the book, and we started in April. He's had to kill so many roamers for a few different reasons. Sometimes it's survival. If you remember, they've been attacked a few times, and other times it is this perception of survival. And what I mean by that is Marlin and his dad, and for a brief period, Tony, the character that we saw for a little bit in the book, they would attack roamers outside of the perimeter of their property to keep the roamers from coming in and getting too close to their house. So that's why he's had to kill so many, and why they continue to attack Marlin and his dad. Really, as the reader, we don't know. Um, it's very animalistic in that the roamers are most likely looking for food. And if you are starving, as a human, you kind of go crazy. But as an animal, if you've seen a starving animal, they are much more likely to be aggressive. And so they are not going to back down in order to get something to eat. And so if Marlin and his dad are food sources, if you will, then the roamers are going to continue to attack. So the next question is from Chelsea, who asked, why don't they find a better place to live? And how do you feel about not being able to keep count of how many people Marlin has killed? So I think, throughout the book, they are always weighing their options as to whether they should stay or go. And as I've talked in the past, I think Marlon had a lot of fear about the unknown, and that's one of the reasons why he stays where he does, because it seems safe at the house in Boonville. And then the other part of your question, how do you feel about how you can't keep count? I think Marlon feels horrible. I mean, I think in the heat of the moment, meaning when Marlon is actually confronted with danger or the perceived danger of the roamers, he is going to take action that is fairly aggressive, in that he is going to not hesitate really to shoot or kill any threat that he sees. And he even mentions in the chapter about the IGA store, he didn't really hesitate to shoot at the guy that was already at the IGA and was defending his territory, if you will. But I think, once he has time to reflect, like he had time to reflect while he was deer hunting at the beginning of the chapter, Marlon knows that ethically, morally, he is damaged, and he is definitely not the person he thought he would be, and feels a lot of guilt, if I had to kind of put it into words as the reader and looking at Marlon from his own perspective. Kayla asked, is he going to stay at that camp where it's very scary? So Kayla is referring to the end of the chapter when he gets to, I think it's called Cedar Lake Village, if you will. Cedar Lake is an actual, it's really a pond, but it's kind of a lake north of Terre Haute, Indiana. And there's like a small little campground there, apparently, in real life. And so for the book, they have found this little area, they being just survivors. And so Marlon finds himself in that village. Now, based on what we read from that, I don't know if Marlon would be really all that interested in sticking around. It seems probably a little bit rougher than even just dealing with roamers. I've said a few times, humans are not necessarily the answer to Marlon's problems. I know a couple times it's been asked, will Marlon go look for survivors, or will Marlon try and go find civilization? And you have to keep in mind, roamers are instinctive. They are animalistic, right? It is scary and it is a threat and they are dangerous, but in a way, in a strange way, roamers are actually fairly innocent. They're just looking for food, or they're maybe kind of defending their territory, if you will. We don't really know for sure as readers, but humans have intent. They have malicious intent, and so the scenes that we see from the village are evidence of that, right? Humans are not necessarily the answer to all of Marlin's problems, because humans can be just as deadly, or maybe even more deadly than the roamers themselves. Cherokee asks, why didn't he just shoot his father when his father told him to? Uh, I think just in that moment, Marlin was not ready to accept the death of his father as well. Because you have to keep in mind, Marlin has already seen the death of his mother. He's seen the death of Tony. And we also kind of notice that Marlin was not the one that killed Tony either. And he kind of struggled a little bit to kill Mr. Harrison at the very beginning of the book. So I think Marlin, as the author, Marlin, even though he is going to be willing to kill these roamers kind of indiscriminately, when it comes to facing the enemy eye to eye, the enemy, of course, being someone that's infected like Tony or his dad or Mr. Harrison, I think Marlin has a much bigger problem with accepting that role of killer, and as he should, I suppose. But just having to kill your own father, I don't think Marlin could do. Which I know I can't do because I'm the author and I wrote that, but I think that's probably the reason. He just can't handle that fact. Okay, so Jory asks, what other things will Marlin do for his family? He's already been desensitized to killing the roamers, so what else has changed? So, Marlin is an interesting character because he says he's desensitized, that he still talks about things. So, I think part of it is Marlin is examining his conscience, and he's trying to determine, is there any good left in him? Is there any humanity left in his character, in his very soul? I don't know how far Marlin would be willing to go. Even as the author, you kind of give these characters life, and then you let them be their own character, if that makes sense. And so, I know what I wrote about Marlin, but at the same time, he's a very interesting fellow. Cesar asked, how many people has he killed? I never put a number on it as the author. Dozens, maybe 100. The question really is there a difference between taking one life and 10 lives? Is there a difference between taking 10 lives and 20 lives, or 10 lives and 100 lives? Does it really matter? I mean, to a certain extent, yes, it does, because each life is an individual life. But at the same time, once you're a killer, you're a killer. And so I never really put a specific number on it. I left it kind of vague. Part of it is writing the book. Keeping a tally of that wasn't a priority for me as the author. Then the other part is, Marlin is writing more about his emotional state than his tallies, right? I think it might be more disturbing, actually, if he said, I've killed X number of roamers, and I'm going to try and get this many tomorrow or whatever. That would be a little bit more disturbing, I think. Nira asked, after Marlin's father died, why wouldn't Marlin try to find his family in Alabama? So we don't really see exactly what happens between the point of his father's death and the point where he gets to Cedar Lake. But, as the author, in my mind, I had Marlin, he sees his father dying by the hands of who we later know as Kilo. But we don't really know exactly what happens next, okay? Because the next journal entry he has is about him waking up to Kilo pointing a shotgun in his face. And so we just kind of assume, in fact, I might have actually written this and then erased it because I didn't want to include it. But, Marlin, after His father gets shot. Marlon has to hide out for a little bit to make sure that there's nobody else around because he doesn't want to get shot at too. And then, maybe he recovers and salvages a few supplies that his dad didn't destroy. Maybe the truck is still running, or we don't really know. But then, he kind of indicated it took 4 whole days to get to Terre Haute. Terre Haute, even from Owensboro, is only about a 3 to 4 hour drive, depending on which direction you take. So, and so to take 4 days instead of 4 hours means that it was a very slow process. Maybe the roads were broken down. Maybe there were cars littered all over the highway. Maybe there were packs of roamers going about. We don't really know because he didn't really write about it. But we imagine that he didn't want to set off again until maybe the next day. So he sleeps. And then when he wakes up, he realizes that Kilo has been watching him. And Kilo is ready to kill him or ready to capture him or whatever you want to say. And so if you have a guy that's pointing a gun at your head, you're not really in a position to negotiate. And so he follows Kilo, or Kilo takes him. We don't really know for sure how he gets there. But he ends up at Cedar Lake Village. And then that's kind of where the chapter ends. So we don't really know what his intentions are just yet. We will in the chapter of December. But we don't really know exactly why he doesn't immediately go, other than the fact that it's probably just not safe. All right, that was a good question. So Benjamin asked, my question is if he's actually thinking about staying at the lake because the people seem not the most funnest to be around. Yeah, that's kind of an understatement, Benjamin. I do not believe, based on kind of Marlon's subtle reactions of the journal entry, that he wants to stick around. I think Marlon was kind of wary of fellow humans anyway. He feels probably a little bit betrayed by Tony and Tony's actions of selfishness because, remember, Tony was bored, and so he went off and killed himself. Not directly killed himself, but you know what I mean. And so Marlon, seeing just the violence and savagery and primitive nature of how those people react in the camp, he's probably not a fan and probably would choose not to stay if he has the option. Iana asks, why did she kill him for accidentally taking Hank's brandy? So you are referring to Clara, who calls herself the LT, or the lieutenant. She's second in command to Kilo. The best answer for that is it's kind of this frontier justice, is what it used to be called whenever Wild West movies and stories were very popular. If you've ever heard, or maybe you've seen, like the Mad Max series, that's kind of what inspired me to write this section of the book, is how do people react in an apocalypse? Some people are going to hunker down. They're going to try and stay safe. They aren't going to bother anybody else, and they just kind of stick to themselves. Other people are going to hoard all of the supplies that they can, and they're going to fight off anybody that tries to help them. And then you have some people that they try to rebuild society, but they rebuild society based on a very black and white interpretation of what is good and what is bad, or however you want to say it. And so their version of justice is very savage. And what I mean by that is, she says theft is punishable by death. So there's no question, because he confessed to stealing Hank's brandy. So instead of putting him on trial or putting him in a stockade or something, that village ran by Kilo and Clara has decided collectively, or maybe just through force, that instant death is what will happen. And the reason for that is because when you have a society that is barely holding on, I'm not saying that this is a good thing, but one way to keep order is to have very strict punishments. And so if you have a strict punishment, you steal something as simple as brandy, you're getting killed. that's going to deter some people from stealing from others. And then that allows for society to focus on other things besides crime prevention, right? So, not necessarily the best approach, but in a way, it is an effective approach that Claire takes. Okay. So, Jada says Marlon and his dad have gotten out of a lot of situations with roamers. So, why don't they at least try to get to his kids? They don't try to find another way. They could also find more things that they need. So Jada, that might have been eventually their plan, but they kind of stalled too long. And as Marlon admits, their luck finally ran out. So they were on a patrol, because patrols can't stop just because you make a decision to go do something else. And that last patrol ended up being a big mistake because his father got attacked. And we don't know exactly how the protozoa gets into human uh, skin or whatever, but we assume it's through the blood, based on what we've read in the book. And that's kind of what I was targeting as the author. These protozoa, the TBR, can get in through blood, saliva, whatever. And, it could have gotten in through his nostrils, through his mouth, or through the open wounds on his face. Because, not only did the blood of the woman get into his wounds whenever he shot her, it splattered, but also just her breathing into his face, those water droplets could have very easily affected him. Now, whether or not that's the case, we don't know. But he did get infected, and so that infection is going to be what ultimately ends up taking his life, even though Kilo's the one that fired the shot. More than likely, his dad probably would have died. And so that's why they weren't looking for the children, and they were going north to try and find that doctor who Marlon saw on the TV, because that really is the only thing that Marlon knows uh, in terms of a possible cure, right? And so in his mind, his dad becomes the priority because he wants to save his dad. He couldn't save his mom. He couldn't save Tony. He feels like he's probably already, in a way, lost his children, even though his children hopefully are still alive. He did not choose to go with his children and his wife to the lodge at the beginning of the book. So his only responsibility in his mind is his dad, and he's going to do whatever it takes to save his dad before he goes to find his children, who hopefully are already saved. Okay, so the next question is, sorry, I lost my place. Carissa asked, do you miss the past and how things used to be? And if so, what do you miss about it? So Carissa, if you are asking if Marlon misses those things, yes, Marlon definitely does. And he probably just misses the ability to see his children. If you're asking me as the author, do I miss the past? I can tell you that I think I'm probably in the majority when I say the pandemic, our current situation of, doing non-traditional instruction is what we call it here. And, staying at home and self-isolating and wearing masks out in public and all those things is definitely a change that I never really expected in my lifetime, and I'd hoped I'd never would see. So, would I like to go back? Absolutely. Do I miss just being able to run to the store or to go to work, to school, to teach in person? Absolutely. And I think that's probably the sentiment that a lot of people have. Michelle asked, did LT kill that man so people knew she was the boss around there, or are thieves actually always punished by death? So the answer to both of those questions is yes. She wanted to show that she was the boss, but she wanted to show that she was the boss because that strict punishment maintains order. Whether it's right or wrong, it maintains order. And by killing him for something so simple as stealing brandy, it shows that she is in charge. Okay, Fabiola asks, since sadly your father has died from the drugs and now it is only you, your brother, and children, you think it's now going to be easier but harder to travel at the same time because of your father's loss. Yes, I definitely think Marlon in his travels will be kind of lost without his dad or without any kind of companion, and we'll see that throughout the rest of the book. It happens very quickly, December and then January, and then the book's done. But it definitely will have an effect on him. Tabitha asks, why did Hank just let Clara boss him around? Even though she's a woman, I find it severely odd that they allow her to treat them like that. So, whenever I wrote that section, I wanted to show that you do not have to be the biggest dog in the yard in order for people to respect you. You just have to have the biggest bark. And so, whatever Clara did in the past, we don't know. But Clara has definitely earned, if not the respect, then at least the fear of those living in the camp. And so I wanted to show that by having this big burly guy, coming up. But then she basically just says, "Look, you're like a little child to me." She slaps him, spits tobacco on him, and makes him go home. And so I did that to show, again, just how much authority Clara had and just how extreme the conditions were in that camp. All right. So Carla asked, was Marlon planning to go where his kids are at and his brother? I think probably, as the author, logically, if he wouldn't have been captured by Kilo, that's where he would have headed next. Okay. Devin asked, if there's a whole group of people in a campsite, do all those helicopters come from there? It's a very good assumption, but I can tell you that that camp does not have any helicopters. We'll find out where they're headed in the next chapter. Gabrielle asked, why did Kilo decide to take him to camp instead of leaving him where he was? Kilo's kind of a strange guy. The whole camp's kind of a strange place. And so, Kilo might have thought he had value. Maybe he had information that he could share. Maybe he thought he would be, a useful, quote unquote, soldier for Kilo and his little band of men and women. We don't really know exactly, but those are probably a few of the reasons. Brianna asked, why did you make the dad who he is now? And why did you make him do the actions he did in the month of November? So there's a movie called Red Dawn from 1984. I know that there's been like a sequel to this, not really a sequel, but like a remake. But in the original Red Dawn, the premise is these children, teenagers, are hiding out from an invasion of another country in the United States in the mountains in Colorado. And they're fairly successful in being able to survive. And so at one point, they say, well, help is going to come. I think it's in the spring. And one of the main characters says, spring is a long time away. So let's not get our hopes up. And so, I had the dad survive as long as he did in the book because I wanted to show that, yeah, you can be successful and you can survive. But at some points, things are going to happen that you can't prevent. And so it kind of mirrors how that movie goes as well. As much success as they have, there is a point in that movie where they no longer have any luck. And so that's what we see here also. Okay. Tyler asked, what has made Claire act so coldly in front of a crowd? The way she was acting made it seem like she was almost proud of killing the man and as though she was using him as an example to enforce the rule further. So again, we don't know a whole lot about the backstory of Clara. She was a very interesting character. I wanted to make sure that she was one of the stronger characters in the novel as the author. And like I said, as the reader, we don't really know her background. And as the author, I left it up to the reader to decide what her background was, why she was so strong and why she was so cold in a way. But it all boils down to, and I've said it a couple times, it boils down to when you are in a situation like that with a bunch of people who are all rugged and, they are probably unruly and they're used to just living by their own rules. Not that it's a good thing or the best way, but an effective way to maintain order is to be very, very strict. And so she can't show emotion. She can't show mercy in her eyes, because if she does, then there might be some guy out there who thinks she's weak, and then he challenges her, and she doesn't want anybody to challenge her authority as second in command. And so that's why she acts so cold. So, Javon, how did the grandpa die? If you remember, Marlon says, the grandpa dies. Um, whenever I wrote it, I again based a lot of the book on real life, and thankfully, my grandfather has not passed away. He's still alive, as of the time of this video here. But in the book, I needed some reason that propelled them to no longer to want to go to deer camp. The real reason, because we actually used to go to deer camp, in like real life, my brother and my dad and my grandpa, was that my uncle just decided to sell the property. There wasn't like any major story behind it or anything. So I guess I could have used the truth in the book, but I didn't feel like it'd be that much drama. Like Marlon wouldn't reflect necessarily on, well, yeah, it was sold, so we just stopped going. I wanted to add a little bit of dramatic effect. I also had a very specific reason for that, because a little bit later on in the chapter, he says, I'm the only one left besides my brother and my children. And I wanted to say that because it separates Marlon from the rest of his humanity, right? If he still has grandparents that are alive, or if he still has, other people that are alive, then it's like, well, he still has this kind of connection to society. Maybe his uncle's alive, maybe he's not. We don't really know. His brother is headed to his uncle's farm. But other than that, we don't really know much about Marlon and his family, his extended family. And so I wanted to point out that, yeah, his grandpa used to go, because that was a real thing that happened in my life. But I couldn't say his grandpa was still alive, because then Marlon might want to go find his grandpa, or there might be a plot hole of what happened to the grandpa. So I had him die. Now, how he died, I didn't really have really any thoughts on that as the author. The reader could just imagine, well, he was a grandfather, so maybe it was old age, maybe it was cancer. I'm going to go with, as the author, I'll just go ahead and give an explanation. He was 80 some odd years old. He got sick, and he just never recovered from his illness. He was just too weak, and so he passed on, as most people do at that age. He died peacefully in his sleep. So, again, thankfully, even though that scene was kind of based on real life, my grandfather, he's still alive and ticking, and he's probably working on his garden right now, actually. All right, so Cecilia asked, why would Clara create a community just to kill them because they made little mistakes? If there is going to be an attack on the camp, shouldn't she gather more people to fend it off? Yeah, so a couple layers of that question there. You have to be kind of cold in order to maintain discipline, and that's really what this is all about, is the discipline. If there is an attack against the camp by roamers, if you have people that can just kind of do whatever they want, or it's fairly lax, maybe some will defend it, maybe some will run away, maybe some will end up stealing everything from the camp while others are out fighting the roamers. So by maintaining that discipline, even though she probably doesn't care if they fear her or if they respect her, but if they are in line, then she can order them, and Kilo can order them, who's the actual leader of the group. And if they can order them, then that meets their objective of maintaining collective security, right? And so that's why she's so harsh with those punishments, because she has to show that if you don't follow their way, then you're gone, right? And if you choose to stick around and disobey the rules, then you're going to die. Or you're free to leave, but you'll probably die because of the threat that exists outside of the camp. Okay, so Alejandro asks, now that his father's gone, what is he going to do? Right now, he's probably thinking how he's going to get out of that camp, if I had to guess. Alexander says, what if he didn't find the drugs? What would have happened to his dad? Would he have died from all the blood that he lost? So it wasn't necessarily the blood loss as much, it was the infection, most likely, that was turning him. And most likely, if he did not have the drugs at the house, and we don't know what those drugs were as the reader, but he probably would have succumbed to the disease a lot like Mr. Harrison did, and Marlon would have been forced to kill his own dad. You know, I wanted to show that Marlon was doing all that he could to save his dad, yet even though Marlon didn't kill his dad and was doing everything he could, kind of indicate that he even, strapped him down in the truck to keep him from wandering off or breaking free. His dad still broke free. His dad was still turning. And, Marlon couldn't face killing his dad when he was infected, when his dad pleaded for him to die, or even when he saw that it probably wasn't going to be likely that he was going to be saved. Um, I put that death in the hands of somebody else because Marlon, I don't think, could have emotionally handled it. From my perspective as the author, onto what his character is. Okay, and then the last question for November is from Bethsy, who asked, my question is that since both of his parents are dead, there isn't anything holding him back from going to find his kids. My real question is, will he go looking for his kids now? And I think that is the ultimate goal of Marlon. And I think, all things being considered, if he can get out of that camp, that would be the most logical place where he will go. We will see very shortly where he goes once we get into the month of December. And so until then, I'm actually going to be creating a couple videos today because you all have done such an excellent job of reading and keeping up with it that I am actually ready for your December questions and your January questions. So I'll be getting to those later today. And those will be posted for you to listen to my responses. Until then, have a great day and take care, and I will talk to you very soon.